Hi, I'm Auntie Dawn. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm making chili. I love eating a rich, soupy bowl of chili in the winter. I grew up eating a slow cooked version that had highly variable results, but mythical chef Josh convinced me not only that chili is a curry, but that the version I'd been jonesing after was diner chili, that slurry that adorns a bowl of fries or a hot dog equally sloppily. My chili has changed a lot over the years, but the best thing that's happened to it is barbecue stock. I saved the bones from an order of ribs, and now I'm going to put them in my pot. Now I'm going to add just enough water to cover them. I'm using a shorter cooking cycle than for chicken stock because there's already spices on the ribs that I want to preserve and I don't want to let them break down. All right, now that the stock has completed its cycle, I've brought it back inside. I'm going to remove the lid and remove the inner pot. And this is what I've got. Now I'm going to strain the solids out. And now that these have dripped dry, I can go compost them. Now I can pour through everything that's left. You can see the little bits of the joints that were left on the bones are mostly dissolved, and now that is all in the stock. It's going to thicken up my chili and give it that nice background base barbecue flavor. And here's the barbecue stock. I've taken the fat cap off of it and melted it in the microwave so it's ready to go. So the fat that's going into this chili is bacon fat. I've also got 3 onions, most of a head of garlic, chili powder. Now, this isn't just powdered up chilies. There's also other ingredients in it like paprika and cumin, and it's important to put a whole lot of this in. I've also got powdered cumin because the chili powder never quite has enough in it. These are my beans. They're cranberry beans that I bought right at the start of the pandemic. They've been soaking overnight. I'll grate up 3 carrots, and I've got the last couple of pizza peppers off the plant before it gave up for the winter. Now here are my wild cards. Normally I'd use tomato paste, but I seem to have run out of that, so I'm going to use a little can of V8. And the other unexpected ingredient is a little can of black olives. I'm going to smash them up in. You won't even taste them, but they add a certain richness to it that I really miss without it. And the other protein I've got going in is a pound of ground beef. I'm going to start by chopping up my garlic. Start by crushing each one on the cutting board. Rather a vastness of garlic, but it really disappears into the chili. I'm going to be doing a fairly coarse chop on this garlic, as it's really going to break down in cooking. But I still want there to be plenty of surface area to get browned, because as with all of my veggies, I will be browning them. Normally I'd put in a good bit of effort to make sure the garlic pieces were all more or less the same size, but because this is going to be cooking for so long, most of it is going to break down, and a few bigger pieces will just give a nice little bite of garlickiness to the finished product. There's my rough chopped garlic. Next I'll chop my onions. Just slicing that bit off the end so it lies flat. Now I'm going to chop them, again, fairly roughly like the garlic, because they are going to cook down an awful lot by the time this dish is done. I imagine there will be no recognizable onion in it, but I always add in fresh onion when I serve. Give it that nice crunch. All right, that's onion 1, only 2 more to go. And here's my chopped onion. Next, I'm going to chop up my 2 little peppers. They're not going to add a whole lot, but it's something I grew myself. Always add something special to a dish. All right, just looking inside to make sure. It's really important with peppers. There can be unfortunate things that go on inside. Make sure there's no soggy black spots. They're going to give your whole dish a moldy taste. These are still good despite my having harvested them in December. Yeah, not a lot of spice, mostly sweet. I really like to taste my ingredients as I go along, because if something has a disagreeable or bitter flavor, then it is better to toss it off and perhaps postpone making that dish than to make it with something that's going to make it taste bad, especially when I'm making such a huge batch. In my experience, it is only worthwhile to make chili in a fairly enormous volume. If we don't eat it up all right away, which definitely happens sometimes, I can pop it in pint jars and put it in the freezer. And there's my little bit of chopped red pepper. Next, I'm going to get these carrots ready to go in the grinder. So I'm just going to take off the wee little bit of ends here, and then I'm going to chop them into chunks that can fit into the shredder. Chunked carrots. Okay, now that the vegetable chopping is done, the last thing I'm going to do before I start using the equipment is to get my ground beef opened up and spread out all over a plate so that it doesn't clump up in the pan. So I'm just going to break it up and try to get it spread out all over this plate. Freezing really breaks up the cell structure of the meat. Whether you're using turkey, beef, or bison or whatever, you're going to want to take steps to make sure that it doesn't clump up. And when it clumps, it just doesn't brown very well. It tends to become these kind of gray masses. After I've been handling raw meat, I usually wash my hands twice just to get that gross feeling off. And there's my ground beef. Now I'm going to shred up my carrots. First, I'm going to pile them like little logs inside the hopper. And there are my shredded carrots. All right, now that all of my ingredients are prepped, I've opened a window. I'm going to get the vent fan going and get my 2 pots, one large frying pan and one deeper Dutch oven type saucepan, quite hot. They're both on medium-high heat to preheat. All right, now that both of my pans are quite hot, I'm going to add part of my ground beef to each. And I want to get this nice and spread out on the pan so it can start browning. So you can see how the fat has started to render out of this one in the saucepan. So I'm going to add a good bit of cumin now. So that can get in right at the bottom of the flavor profile and add a lot of richness. I'm also going to add a bit of cayenne at this point. I know people say you should never just sprinkle your container because moisture will get in, but I go through my spices so fast that it never makes them clump or anything. All right, I'm going to turn the heat on that down to medium-low. Get back to this one, turning this one back up to medium because it's browning a little more slowly. Want to make sure all that pink is gone before I start adding other ingredients. The beef in the big fry pan is not really started to brown yet, so I'm going to keep that going. But as you can see, the stuff I've spiced over here is already starting to really stick. So I'm going to start to add some stock. And the first of the chili powder. I'm going to layer the chili powder in as we go along, but I want to get a good solid base with a couple of tablespoons right here at the beginning. Chili is a flexible dish both ways. You can add all sorts of ingredients, meat, different sorts of beans, different vegetables. The carrots really add a nice sweetness to it, but it also requires flexibility on the part of the cook because you never quite know how things are going to work out. For me, it never comes out the same way twice. Another really nifty trick, if you can manage to keep a jar of your last batch of chili in the freezer and right at the end add it to your new batch of chili, then it adds just this wonderful depth and richness to it. But usually for me at that point, that last jar of chili has long ago become chili omelets. Getting nice and frylicious, so I'm going to add about half of my garlic. I'm going to add a sprinkle of salt. This is hickory smoked salt. Give a nice base of that smoky, barbecuey flavor that I really like in my chili. Okay, this is finally starting to brown up. Excellent. I want this to brown and even start to kind of stick to the bottom of the pan because the next ingredient I'll be adding to this pan is the onions. And they're going to really want to soak up all of that nice rich brownness. All right, now I'm going to add a bit of cumin to this ground beef. This is sticking nicely, so I'm going to give it some more stock. Okay, this is starting to brown, so I'm going to pour it off into here. Don't worry about getting any remnants because next up is the onions. And I'm going to actually start these with a bit of soy sauce. You won't be able to taste any bit of soy sauce in the finished dish, but using soy sauce or fish sauce really helps give a nice depth of flavor to it. All right, now I'm going to cover this up. Pay attention to stirring this in. You can see all of that stock that I've added so far has just completely disappeared. It's going to be time for me to turn this down. Add a bit more stock. And cover it up to soften. And meanwhile, the beans are done. You can see how they're all nice and soft. Excellent. I was worried that holding them in storage this long was going to make them hard, but no, a good overnight soak with a couple of changes of water and a pressure cook did the job. These are so soft that I'm going to add them in more toward the end of the cooking process so they don't just become complete mush. So we'll set that aside. Oh yeah, you can see how nicely simmering away that is. Now I'm going to use one of my special ingredients, and actually the first bit of this can of olives I'm going to use is the juice. That'll help cook down into the base and give it a really nice rich flavor. Cover that back up and check in on our onions. Oh yeah, they're getting browned. Another covering. Okay, now that these onions have softened up nicely, I'm going to transfer them to go be with the beef. And I'm going to deglaze this with a bit of water. You can see there's a good bit of fond there still stuck to the bottom. Now I'm going to add another chunk of chili powder to the main bowl, and some more cumin, and stir that up and cover while the other pan comes back up to temperature. I'm going to add my tomato, just part of it, get that deglazed. Add the tomato to get that richness working in there. You can see how the onions are starting to break down, and cover that again. And now we're ready for some more onion cooking. Onions are such a delightful ingredient. And you can keep them practically forever, especially if you manage to fit them in the fridge. And they add so much sweetness and richness to a dish, as well as just body. I understand the Eastern European folklore is that where the devil first set foot on the earth, where he planted his left foot, there grew garlic, and where he planted his right foot, there grew onions. And I'm grateful for both of them. Smoked salt. Being fairly restrained with the salt, there's a lot of different sources of salt in the ingredients in this. And I'm also at the end probably going to want to end in a little bit of beef bouillon concentrate just to punch up the beef flavor. Already starting to cook and get a little bit brown on the bottom. Excellent. I'm going to rotate it to make sure that both of the vents on the side are covered because I want to keep the moisture in there to really steam and start to break down those onions. Oh yeah. Oh, these onions are getting nice and brown. I'm going to turn off the heat under them and transfer. Get up that fond with a little water. Really don't want any part of this burning. It will add a very unagreeable flavor to it. I'm also going to add my chopped up olives and some more of the tomato juice. All right, another chunk of bacon fat in this pan. All right, now I can start sauteing up this shredded carrot. You're not going to taste the carrot in the finished chili, but it does add a nice note of sweetness and some more body and texture. You can see I'm scraping all the way to the bottom. All of that water is totally evaporated. All of the stock that I've added, all of the liquid from the vegetables, and a bit of water, the V8, it's all absorbed in or evaporated away. So the point I'm going to want to get with on this carrot is that it starts to brown up. So I'm going to leave it open the whole time so I can keep an eye on it because carrot is rich in natural sugars. It will definitely burn if you take your eye off it for long enough. Add in the last of my garlic here. Let that start to get sauteed in the juices. Another little touch of soy sauce. The carrot has started to brown. I'm going to transfer it to the chili. Again, I'm going to deglaze this pan. The carrot will have left a whole lot of sugar on there. I do not want that burning. Up with the heat again. Stirred in. All right, I'm going to add the last of this tomato juice and another round of chili powder. All right, now more bacon fat and carrot. Okay, so the second batch of carrots is now browning up. So I'm going to transfer it to the chili. One more deglazing. All right, now I'm going to heat up this pan on medium-low heat because the last thing I'm going to cook is these red peppers from my garden. Add a little bit of this juice from the beans. Nice. I'm going to add a good bit more chili pepper. Get these sauteed up. Just a little bit of salt and cover them up. Okay, let's check in on these peppers. Nice. Starting to brown up, giving up their water. Yes, I'm going to turn this down. I really don't want to burn these. All right, that is far enough to transfer them to the chili. All right, now I'm going to recover this and let it simmer while I get some dishes done. Another tasting, some more chili powder. And I think that to add the beans, I'm going to have to transfer this to a larger container. All right, here is the stock pot of holding. I can start to transfer over. All right, let that come up to a bubble. Now that it's simmering, I'm going to start to add my beans. So before I added beans, I tasted it a few times to make sure it was right at the outer edge of how spicy I want it. Because the beans are going to absorb a lot of that flavor. They are essentially bland, though with their nice beany flavor, of course. Okay, now that it's had a chance to come together with the beans, just simmering for a couple minutes, I'm going to taste it again and see what it needs. Make sure I get a bean in there. Mm, yum. Mm. Yeah, could use some more salt. Whew. So at this point, I'm going to add a goodly scoop of this bouillon concentrate. Punch up the beef flavoring, give some more salt. It's funny, I always associate chili with summer. Maybe it was because it was always a side dish at barbecues and cookouts, but it really hits the spot in the winter. So you see, there's not a hugeness of tomato in here. The only actual tomato is whatever was in the tomato juice. But I just found I wasn't a fan of finding little bites of tomato in it. Though I am usually a fan of the tomato in pretty much all of its phases, from fried green to marinara, but it just did not work for me. But I found that adding in tomato paste or tomato juice gives it that same acidic richness that it needs to balance all of the richness of the meat and the beans. All right, it's been simmering a bit. Let's see how it tastes. That's it. Nice and rich, complicated, full of that chili flavor. That is done. And here's my finished chili. You can see it's quite runny. All that water and stock in there just makes it so luxurious. So this is pretty tasty right now, but it's going to be even better in a couple of days. I'm going to package all of this up, make something else for dinner tonight, and then we'll be able to have this when it's reached its peak deliciousness. I'll serve it with cornbread, chopped onions, and a little bit of cheese on top. So tasty. Tell me in the comments below how you like your chili. I hope you enjoy this chili as much as I do. See you next time. So before we go, I wanted to let you know, so I always release videos every Tuesday and Thursday, but sometimes I release a bonus video. So if you want to make sure you get notification of that, make sure when you go to your subscriptions page and choose Auntie Dawn's Kitchen, you hit that notifications button in your upper right hand corner. Then when you log on to YouTube and check under your notifications, under the bell icon at the top of the page, it'll tell you everything that I've posted